Hello and welcome to the Lombardi Live podcast. This is a joint UK media podcast previewing Super Bowl 54 between the San Francisco 49ers and the Kansas City Chiefs. We have some incredible guests joining from across the UK's podcast and media community, as well as a couple of names you'll recognise from TV and radio. Duncan, you've been working really hard over the last few months in putting this together, so why don't you tell our listeners what it's all about?
Hi Liz, hi everyone. Well, I was inspired by a day of interviewing the Chicago Bears players last summer, and I realised just how much choice there is out there in the UK alone for different coverage and all sorts of podcasts. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if everyone could just come together as one big unit and produce something special? Just one big podcast for all the other listeners and followers. And here it is.
Awesome. Well, listen, I can't wait to get going. But first, I'd like to share the fact that this podcast is dedicated to our friend and colleague Steve Rains. He sadly lost his short battle with cancer in November. Jamie and Jack from the Kickers Matters podcast, they are running a charity raffle in memory of Steve, and there are some amazing NFL prizes to be won. So this includes a signed Oakland Raiders cap, a signed Effie Abada Panthers jersey, an Xbox One Madden code, a year's subscription to Gridiron magazine, and a full-size chrome New England Patriots helmet signed by Rob Gronkowski. This is a cause that means a lot to us, with all the money raised going to Steve's wife and son. Tickets are £10 for one or 2 tickets for $15. You can buy as many as you want, and anyone from around the world can enter and win. Just go to www.justgiving.com/crowdfunding/Steve-Rains. And to make a donation for however many tickets you want, in the message box, you must put your Twitter handle so that Jamie knows who you are. The raffle closes on Super Bowl Sunday, so February the 2nd, so still a couple of weeks to get left to get involved and try and win one or more of these prizes. For more information and the full list of prizes, pay Jamie a visit on Twitter. His handle is @Jamie_ByromKM. So I'll spell that out. It's JAMIE_BYROMKM. And we'll make sure we'll share details on Twitter as well.
Thanks, Liz. Everyone, do go and check that out. Again, that's www.justgiving.com/crowdfunding/Steve-Rains or @Jamie_ByromKM.
Awesome. So for Steve, let's get on with the show.
Let's do this.
First, let me introduce Simon Carroll and a team who are looking at the Kansas City Chiefs defense.
Thanks, Liz, and hi, everyone. My name is Simon Carroll. Some of you may well know me as host of the Collapsing Pocket podcast, and I'm delighted to be invited by Duncan to be part of this collaboration, joined by 3 other prominent members of the NFL community, and we've been tasked with discussing the Kansas City Chiefs defense. I've got Wade, Thomas, and Tom here with me. Welcome, guys. Would you like to introduce yourselves to listeners?
Hey everyone, I'm Wade McWayne here with NFL in London, the podcast. We do the podcast, me and Ryan Cull, and we also put on events across London. Thanks for having us on, or having me. Ryan's in Canada.
Beautiful. I can't live up with that enthusiasm and energy in the voice, but I'm Tom Deacon, massive 49ers fan, and very excited to see the Niners back in the Super Bowl.
Hi, I'm Thomas Moore. I'm from what was the Moore and Connolly football show, which is now defunct. So I've got on the blower with Ollie, and he's given me some notes, and I'm going to try and, as eloquently as I can, deliver them tonight.
Thanks very much, guys. Glad to have you all with me. Sunday's championship games, they've left us with what looks to be a very exciting Super Bowl 54. 2 high-powered offenses that will be difficult to control. I think for the Chiefs D, which we'll be discussing today, the man tasked with slowing down that attack is Steve Spagnuolo, who was hired this time last year to replace Bob Sutton, whose defense capitulated to the Patriots in the playoffs. Spags has instantly converted them from a 3-4 to a 4-3, brought in parts like Frank Clark, Emmanuel Ogberg, got rid of D4, Justin Houston. It's taken most of the season, but just how far has this defense come on in 12 months? We'll have you first, Wade, please.
Well, you know what? It's not only the past start of the season that they've come on. It's the past few weeks that they've come on. You know, since Derrick Henry gashed them, was it week 10 for like 188 yards? They've tightened up their defense. They've tightened them up to there's been no 100-yard rushing game since the past 5 weeks. So the Chiefs have really recognized that this is their big weakness. Their run defense is horrible. You know, when you go from 31st to 25th worst or best, that's not a good sign. But, this is their big thing that they have to address. If they can't get this, when a San Francisco 49er team has been run the whole playoffs, this is it. If you can't put up with this, even if they go down, San Francisco is going to keep coming at you with that run. So they really have to fill these holes in, and they did a good job against Derrick Henry last week. But Derrick Henry's a power running back. The other guys you have are speedsters. They can all run a 4.3, 4.4. Once they crack a hole, they're gone. You're going to have to figure out how they're going to contain those guys.
That's right. 69 yards just for Derrick Henry last week. We saw Spagnuolo bringing out goal line defenses on the halfway line, stuff like that. Chris Jones used sparingly in that game, coming on third downs, stuff that Titans run game. Just how crucial will a fit and healthy Jones be, Thomas, in negating the varied 49ers running game?
Well, for me, actually, the thing that I'd actually talk about when it comes to the 49ers and the entire offense in general, to be quite honest, I don't think the key is Chris Jones. I think the key here is Daniel Sorensen. Because essentially what you've got here in this situation, in this particular matchup, is he plays a lot of dime linebacker, and Casey has to stay in their three-base safety set. Now, he's been excellent this year. He's been absolutely fantastic. He's been thudding against the run, and he's been nice kind of teaming up with Tyrann Mathieu, of course, in the passing game against tight ends. And I think the key here is how he deals in his relationship with Mathieu with Kittle. Because he's a completely different animal from anyone they face. I mean, I've heard a load of people talking about Travis Kelce like he's the God-given gift of tight ends. I started to wonder whether some people have even watched Kittle play, because this guy is playing better than anybody at the moment. And honestly, if Sorensen can't handle in the role that he's got to play Kittle, then I don't think the 49ers can actually be stopped on offense. I think that's the key to this game. That's the matchup I'm looking at.
That's quite a key one, actually. To be fair, Sorensen has balled out since stepping in for Juan Thornhill, who went down in December. That was a rookie. He was playing really well, to be fair, as well. Kittle, absolute nightmare, I'd say. I don't even know. He's so multifaceted that it's going to be difficult for this Chiefs D just to quite key on him. We saw Kyle Shanahan on the sidelines kind of calling him he's going to be held at this point, because he just knows that he's literally unplayable at the moment. But yeah, that secondary is important. I think the addition of Tyrann Mathieu to this team, Tom, pretty big one for them.
Tyrann Mathieu, the Honey Badger, the experience he brings to that Chiefs defense is quite remarkable, because they're going to let him off the leash and let him G up the rest of the troops on their side. And as a Niners fan, I'm concerned. This Chiefs team, as you mentioned earlier, Steve Spagnuolo came in and has really revolutionized this team. You want to throw against them? They're eighth best in the league, whereas last year they were second worst in pass yards allowed per game. So, try and run it, as we heard earlier. Like, Derrick Henry wasn't allowed to get that. And Jimmy G is known for throwing a few interceptions, but I think Tyrann Mathieu is that guy that the Niners will hate to play against. Hated playing against them at the Cardinals back in the division with the Niners. So for me, he's going to be influential, but it's also Suggs, the man who's come in to bring a little bit of postseason experience, and he's really lifted that defense for the Chiefs.
He has, actually. In terms of Super Bowl experience, there's Terrell Suggs, who's obviously been there with the Ravens before, and we've got Frank Clark as well, who in his first season as a rookie went to the Super Bowl with the Seahawks. But aside from that, there's not really that much experience on this Kansas City Chiefs defense in terms of player performance. They had one game last year, two so far this year. When you're coming up against such a clever play caller as Kyle Shanahan, is that really going to affect? Is that going to be like a mental thing they're going to have to overcome any point soon?
Oh, well, mental points are going to be something you have, because obviously leading up to the Super Bowl, everyone likes to talk about your fallacies. You're the ugly girl at the prom. Here you go. Let's bring out all the horrible things that you have about you. So everyone is going to say defense, 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 defense. We talked about the Patriots about this last year. Look what the Patriots did. They come up with this boomer Patriots defense that happened this season. Let's not forget, in the past 5 games, they've only allowed 10.4 points per game. That's ridiculous. They're the lowest amount that people can score on them. So obviously they have been working on this. And as much as people talk about, you got to keep this defense, you got to keep it down, I think they're there. I think they're starting to work on it. The problem is going to be, can you stop a relentless run of the 3-headed monster of the San Francisco running backs? And I don't know if they can do that.
That is something that I don't think many teams have managed to be able to control this season, I would say. It's a phenomenal running attack that it's almost like a throwback to the maybe like the 50s, 60s, where ball eight throws for Jimmy G last week, 6 completions. I mean, how do you cope with that? And it's probably going to be completely different in the Super Bowl.
You've got Matt Breida, too, who's the biggest of all the guys, right? And he hasn't been really used since that Atlanta game where he dropped the ball twice. But and he's the big power running back, not as big as Henry, but you've got Mostert and you've got Coleman. Those guys are 4-3 runners. As soon as they break through, they're gone. Unlike Derrick Henry, you could chase that guy down. It would be tough to still take him down. But the other two guys are speedsters. Once they cut, they're gone. And it's going to be up to Matthew to try to chase those down. And he's already said he's worried about those guys.
Well, a bit of honesty from Tyrann Mathieu. In that championship game, he was dead set on getting to the Super Bowl. As Thomas said, that secondary is key on the run. And if they can stop the run and put the ball in Jimmy G's hands, Thomas, is that really where they're going to win the game?
I think it is. I think we all probably overlook the fact that Jimmy G is still going through his development. He did it at the Patriots, then he went over to the 49ers, and now he's still in the early years of his career. And this is going to be a huge stage for him to perform on. And I think perhaps he's been hidden a little bit in that 49ers offense. I think he's done a job. I won't call him a game manager. There's all kind of things we can, tag people with in terms of lines. But he's not a superstar yet, Jimmy G. And if the Chiefs can play this correctly and put the pressure on him, I think that might be their optimum route to actually getting success in this game. Because if you look at this Kansas City team, it's always been about it's all about Patrick Mahomes, and it's all about what that offense does and the fact that they can run off 50 points in a row, and they can do that against anybody. And with that, your defensive side of the ball can fall somewhat under the radar, perhaps. So now, realistically, the pressure is on them. The pressure is on this Kansas City Chiefs defense, because the offense will score points and the 49ers will score points as well, unless you stop them. So otherwise it's going to be 55-58 and the most incredible Super Bowl anybody's ever seen.
Well, I think we're all hoping for that. To make a good point though, I mean, with this offense you've got Paddy Mahomes, things like that, how good, Tom, do you think this Chiefs defense really needs to be? Does it just like 2 or 3 stops in the game will make all the difference?
Well, the Niners are a team that rolls on momentum, so when they're running that football, that's exactly what Kyle Shanahan wants. And Jimmy G, he's got some clutch moments in him against the Seahawks earlier in the season. There's a few games where we had to come back to win it. So I think for the Niners, they're concerned. Get the ball rolling, run the football. That's exactly what they want to do. But the Chiefs need to get them off the field as quick as possible. It's the beautiful thing about the NFL is how long is your defense going to be on that field? If they're on there for over 30 minutes, then you're really pushed against it. And that's exactly what the Niners want, is make sure the Kansas City Chiefs defense stays on that field as long as possible. And because we just know how lethal Mahomes is. So that's the game plan. Try and stay on that field as long as possible. Worked against the Vikings, worked against the Green Bay Packers. I just feel that this Chiefs defense is prepared for the run and will be able to handle it.
Well, that's it, certainly. Go on.
God, I was going to throw in a point there. Don't judge anything based on what my Green Bay Packers did last week. They are the most fraudulent 13-3 team I have ever seen, and I definitely knew it myself.
I think a lot of people's takeaways is that the Green Bay Packers was not quite worthy of that 13-3 status. As far as the Chiefs defense goes, I think we're all in agreement. They have kind of stepped it up the last 6 weeks. The run defense in particular, they've managed to control Derrick Henry. But as we said, this is a completely different dynamic they're going to be coming up with this week. Mostert with 220-odd yards, and that's the most yards on the ground in San Francisco's 49ers history. Never mind just the playoffs in any game. The speed kills. It's going to be a different test. I'm interested in just seeing just exactly the front four maybe for the Chiefs, which obviously goes under the radar somewhat, even though they have brought in all these new parts. Wade, is there any standout member on that front line that you think could do the job?
No, I think they're all solid. They're all big parts that they're going to be moving along there. They're going to have to do a lot of movement, I think, in this as well, because the way that San Francisco runs this ball and the way that Jimmy, he could just hand off, but they're going to have a few trick plays, I think, ready to go. It's a Super Bowl. Shanahan's going to have some stuff ready to go. I think that front four is going to get tired. It's not like the front four of San Francisco, who are just beasts, but they're gonna have their hands full all day. They're just gonna be grabbing runners the whole day. So I think all of them stand out. But any injuries and you're screwed. But right now I think they're looking good.
Shanahan obviously got to the Super Bowl as the defensive coordinator of the Falcons a few years ago, and to some extent almost came under a lot of scrutiny for his game plan. and how they threw away that big lead, the 28-3 that everyone knows about. Chiefs possibly get into his head a little bit, maybe, Tom, and try and, I don't know, make him question himself a little bit with some of this play calling?
I definitely think so. I think the experience is there with the Niners. I know Andy Reid is the man who's almost done it. I think with Shanahan and the likes of Jimmy G being at the Patriots, that they know how to win. And I think that the pressure is definitely going to be on the Chiefs. We know how potent their offense is. Whether they can deliver in the big moments and the big stage at the Super Bowl, we'll have to wait and see. But I don't want to give a prediction, but I feel like as long as the Chiefs defense can raise their game as well as they played when they didn't have Mahomes earlier in the regular season, I think this is going to be a very juicy contest. But as a Niners fan, I think they're going to take it.
Wow. So a big task ahead for the Kansas City Chiefs defense. I think we're all in agreement that basically they've got to stop the run, they've got to stop the pass, they've got to do anything they possibly can do to get that San Francisco 49ers offense off the field and get the road on there. Thanks very much for joining us, guys. My thanks to Wade, Thomas, and Tom for joining me. And a big thanks once again to Duncan Terry for organising a great podcast. I've been Sammy Carroll, and with that, I'll hand it over to Neil Gutson, who'll be discussing the Chiefs offense.
Okay, thanks for that, Simon. This is the Kansas City Chiefs offense section of the podcast. My name is Neil Dutton. You can find me at the Waxing Lyrical with Mains and Duts podcast. I'm joined by Kadeem Simmons, Tim Monk, and the president of the Jameis Winston fan club himself, Mr. Charles Dagnall. Gentlemen, how are we?
Yeah, I'm really good. As you said, I'm Kadeem. I am from the Nickel and Dime podcast, and I am enjoying my evening so far.
Yeah, Tim here from the full 10 yards. Pumped for this one, pumped for the Super Bowl, so I can't wait to get into it.
I'm Charles Dagnall. I don't have a podcast. I'm sat in a hotel speaking to you with not much better else to do. So why you've got me on, I'm not quite sure. But no, used to do the Huddle Inside the Huddle podcast on with the NFL UK with Neil Reynolds, and now I've just been sort of wandering in the NFL wilderness for quite some time.
Well, there's worse places to be wandering, I suppose.
I reckon so.
Okay, we'll get straight into it. I don't know, we're supposed to talk for 15 minutes about the Kansas City Chiefs offense, but it's a fairly dull unit, I think. I'm not sure how we'll have anything to talk about.
Who wants to go first?
Well, I say, Daggers, in case people don't know, you obviously have played quarterback in your time. Obviously, I'm going to guess maybe not at the level that Patrick Mahomes is playing at.
Well, we're different styles of quarterback, Neil. I mean, everybody's got their strengths, haven't they? And Patrick Mahomes has his, and I had mine. What I will say is, all right, I'll kick off. And I'm actually going to go back and talk from a actual playing. And I'm actually going to mix sports here, so I know you'll all hate it. But there's numerous things about Patrick Mahomes which are just completely wow. He's still so young. And what he has done since taking over the starting job has been nothing short of astonishing. Yes, they got done in the AFC title game last year, but now they've gone one better. And where I am amazed by Patrick Mahomes is his awareness for someone so young. Obviously, he can be wow with his arm strength and his running ability, but it's the awareness and his athleticism to read the situation in front of him. Now, I'm going to give you a little. Back in the day when I was playing cricket for Leicestershire and Warwickshire, you're throwing, throwing a ball. It was what we did day in, day out. Now, if you watch someone like Patrick Mahomes not only move but also throw in the opposite direction across his body from which way he's running to a receiver in a sort of diagonal fashion, I cannot tell you how difficult that is. Right now, we used to do this. You picked up a ball and you threw it down at the stumps across your body. Now, that's fine when something's coming along the floor and there's no one around you. When you have, defensive lineman on your back, you're rolling out to your right-hand side and you manage to complete a 10, 15-yard pass across your body over the other side of the field, that is the thing that blows my mind. It's those sorts of things that are wow factors. Yes, he can throw a 60, 70-yard ball. That's great. Yes, he can use his speed when, the coverage is good and he can that he can't find an outlet. But it's that and his movement with his eyes, which I think has come on so much this year, is making defenses misread where he's going. He has got so much which, so many opposition defenses will be frightened to death with. Whether this particular one, arguably one of the best, if not second best defense in the league, will be as concerned with the clientele that they've got, up against him, I don't know. But he is wonderful to watch. He is, a staggering athlete. And it just makes you want to see more and see how he goes up against the best, which he's going to do a week on Sunday.
I think one of the things that I notice about the Chiefs is that it sounds odd, but aside from Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, the rest of the players they've got on offense, they're not particularly big names. They're not, the best of the best. I mean, they've started running the ball better in recent weeks, but that's with Damian Williams. I mean, in the past, the Kansas City Chiefs have had, Jamal Charles or Kareem Hunt, whereas now it just seems to be I'm not going to get into the whole analytics argument, but the fact that they have such an efficient and explosive passing game has made it easier for them to run the ball. Now, obviously, from my own experience being an Eagles fan, I know that Andy Reid can ignore the running game like he ignores salad. And if he doesn't want to run the ball, he just won't. But we did see at times against the Titans, it was coming out of the second half, they just seemed to try and establish the run. And that makes this offense, I think, very, very dangerous.
Yeah, and I also think, the emergence of Sammy Watkins last week just made a massive, massive difference. It means the 49ers can't just key in on, Tyreek Hill. They have to at least respect Sammy Watkins. And when you've got multiple weapons, Mahomes, as he's shown all season and last year as well, he will just pick you apart. It's, the question is, how do you stop this offense? And so far, no one really seems to know how to.
Yeah, I mean, for me, this game does literally come down to Patrick Mahomes, and when you look at the other side of the ball, when you've got Jimmy G on the other side, it's a no contest really. Star power of Patrick Mahomes, like you say, Charles, he's got more highlights already than someone that's been inducted into the Hall of Fame, isn't he? But I mean, when you're a Kansas City offense that's second in net yards per attempt and second in percentage of terms of drives that end in a score, that's all due to Patrick Mahomes. It doesn't take long for him to do things like he did against the Tennessee Titans, where he runs for 20-30 yards and into the end zone. And when you've got someone that can do that, Kansas City are always going to feel, no matter where they are in the game and how far ahead or how far they are behind, they're always going to be in the game. And that's that confidence just breeds through that team.
I reckon that Damian Williams is massively unheralded. He's he and Shady McCoy, barely got 1,000 yards between them. I think they didn't even reach that between them. 39th and 42nd, I think they were in the regular season. But I think that Damian Williams is hugely unheralded. He catches many, many passes out the backfield. He's got great hands. Quarterbacks love that, having that outlet. I think he's a nuggety runner. I don't think the offensive line for Kansas City is wow factor. I think it's okay. It does a job, and due to the athleticism of Mahomes, it hides a lot of things. But I think that Damian Williams is a real get out of jail card, and he is underrated at your peril. Now, one thing we know about the 49ers defense is it is rapid, and they will not have come up against pace like that. Yes, the Tennessee defense decent, but they put 35 on them last week. It matters not, I believe, if Kansas City are 14, 20, 25 points down, it doesn't make any difference, because inside a quarter they could be up by a touchdown. Such is the pace and their potency. But I believe that they're trying to find more of a role for Damian Williams, and you get him involved as well. And you, like the boy said, you got to cover Kelce, you've got to cover Watkins, you've got to cover Tyreek Hill. You could stick Mecole Hardman in there, who's absolutely rapid, and then Damian Williams as well. So they have so many weapons. Plus, I'll be interested to see how they deal with Mahomes, and if they spy him, how they're going to play, how the linebackers are going to play him. But I just think that Damian Williams is one of those players that you forget about him at your peril, because I think he really is. He's got something about him.
Yeah, Damian Williams as well, just worth mentioning. He's not obviously played a full season as well. He's had a bit of time out of injury. So, funnily enough, that it could be that because he's not had a season's worth of carries, he's actually a bit more fresher than what some other running backs might be in the league. So, obviously, LaShawn McCoy came in and did a few bits for him. But last 3 games he's had at least 14 touches and a decent target share too, with getting at least 6 targets in the last 3 games. So, Damian Williams is going to be a pivotal part of negating that and nullifying that pass rush. And I think obviously Reed will have a little trick up his sleeve with Mahomes as well, bootlegging. Because if you go back to that Green Bay game last week, they tried to bootleg and move the offensive line and move the pocket to help Aaron Rodgers a bit more time. I think Andy Reid will look at that and try and do something the same.
For me as well, I think one thing we have to remember, obviously in the last few days, tweeting from his couch, Darrelle Revis has thought it was a good idea to take shots at Richard Sherman, because obviously this is what people do now when they retire. They don't go gracefully into that good night. They sit there and I'm not saying he's a has-been, but obviously Richard Sherman is still playing at a very high level. But we have seen in the past that if Richard Sherman struggles at all, it's not with your big physical alpha receivers. It's with the smaller, shiftier receivers, and that's Tyreek Hill. And also as well, what the Chiefs will not do, they will not line up Tyreek Hill just on one side of the field for him to go up against Sherman. They'll move him all over the place. He'll swap with Sammy Watkins. He'll go into the slot. So it's a question of if the 49ers are going to go against type and move Sherman around to try and take Hill out the game. I don't know if Sherman, even as good as he has been playing, if his skill set is one that can nullify Tyreek Hill. Because, I mean, the guy is, one of the fastest players in the NFL. He reminds me very much of myself in my youth, apart from, the catching ability and the general all-round sporting ability. But he's been relatively quiet. He wasn't a huge part of what they did against the Titans. Travis Kelce, again, was massive against the Texans, but didn't do as much against against the Titans. So they basically, the AFC Championship game, that's when Sammy Watkins plays, because aside from week 1 of this season, he didn't do an awful lot. Nah. He scored 3 touchdowns in the first half against the Jaguars in week 1, and then didn't score again until last week. And then last year, he was also in the AFC Championship game as well. So obviously that's when he plays. We don't know if he can do it 2 weeks in a row. But it's just, again, watching the Eagles every week this season, and then you watch the Chiefs offense, and it's like, I'm sorry, are we allowed speedy players? I thought everything had to be a slow, boring dirge up the field. I didn't realise we were allowed to have track athletes on this team.
I don't know what the boys think, but I'll be intrigued to see how, with as good a defensive line as San Francisco have, if they just don't back off, worried about the deep play, the big play from Watkins, from Tyreek Hill. And I've just got a funny feeling they might give them a little bit of cushion, the receivers, and that's where your Kelce's and your Damian Williams are going to come to the fore. Yes, you can line Tyreek up in a variety, X, Y, or Z, but I just wonder if they're going to be concerned. I agree with Sherman on Hill. They'll double him, have no doubt about that, which leaves one-on-ones elsewhere. And I just wonder if we'll actually see a slightly shorter passing game from the Kansas City Chiefs, and whether we'll see them exploit the middle of the field. I don't know what you boys think.
I think that's also a dangerous game, though, because, if the Chiefs start throwing slants to Tyreek Hill, he's got the kind of speed to make a man miss in the open field. And, even if it's like a 5-10 yard slant, if he sees space in front of him, he's going to hit it hard. And, all it takes is one juke, one little drop of the shoulder, and he's off to the races. So it's kind of that pick your poison, death by 1,000 strokes, Again, how do you stop them?
What is, good for my brand, for, what I predominantly write about, is the fact that this game features 2 of the best tight ends in the entire NFL.
Tight end,
I can't get enough of them. It's, as someone once said to me, these guys have to learn to be offensive linemen and they have to learn to be wide receivers. So whereas everyone else, you just get your one job. These guys are, ridiculously intelligent, and plus they're big buggers. And speaking as someone who's, a weedy little excuse of a man, it's something, that, I'd like to think that maybe I could have been, if things had just been different. And the best thing about these 2 tight ends, obviously George Kittle and Travis Kelce, is that they can, while they're both great receivers, they're excellent after the catch, great red zone weapons, they are proper tight ends.
Yeah.
They don't mind sticking their face in where other people are sticking their feet in their hands. And it's just a question of if Kelsey is, Kelsey's brother has already won has won a Super Bowl. I think, that he'd like to do it just to continue, the family line. And it's just a question of the 49ers defense. It was very, very good against the Titans, but Jonnu Smith, bless him, is not in the same ballpark as Travis Kelce. Last thing we'll come to, though, boys. Obviously, in the last 2 games, the Chiefs have fallen behind. Obviously, against the Texans, they went absolutely nuclear. They're saying, how dare you presume to score 24 unanswered points on us? And then last week, they went 10 points down against the Titans, when it was a little bit more of a, that's fine, we've got this. Are you worried that maybe they're coming up against a defense that it might be too dangerous to start slowly against? Or do you think, as Daggers has already pointed out, that this team can score so quickly that it doesn't really matter if they find themselves behind?
I would say I don't think it matters too much. And I say that because from what we've seen of Patrick Mahomes, he can change the game, not only, with his arm, but with his legs as well. And when you've got, both of those to look out for, it wouldn't surprise me if the Chiefs, even if they go down 3 scores, still look at it and go, there's plenty of time, because they can score so quickly. Again, it's that one deep bomb or one big play. So when you can score points at ease with speed as well, then you're never really truly out of a game.
I think the way the Kansas City match up against, Richard Sherman's going to be having nightmares before the game, and depending on who's he's facing up against. But like I say, at the top of our segment, Kansas City are second in terms of net yards per attempt, and the second in terms of percentage drives that end in a score. So Kansas City are going to keep scoring. Even if they do get behind, it's like, well, we've been in this position before. We know how to come back from it. We're going to do it again. If anything, it might even give them more confidence to know, look, we might be 21 points in the hole, but we've done it before. We've come back from 24 points. So why can't we do it in this game?
Daggers, final thought from you?
Well, all signs are pointing to shootout in Miami. The amount of offense that both teams have created, generally Kansas City through the air and San Francisco on the ground. I look at this San Francisco defense and I look at this defensive line and I just wonder how many times actually they're going to blitz or need to blitz. This is, they'll do it in certain points of the game, but I just think that those 2 ends in Bosa and Buckner, I just wonder if actually it's too much for an ordinary, and I'm maybe being unkind, but I think the Kansas City offensive line is pretty ordinary. I don't think it's sensational. I think a lot of paper has gone over 1 or 2 cracks there because of what Patrick Mahomes has done. So I'll be more intrigued to see how the San Francisco defense lines up against this Kansas City offense, just for the fact that I just wonder if they're rushing 4, that more often than not they're going to be in Mahomes' face one way or another. Now, whether they can bring him down is another matter, but I'll be intrigued to see that. Overall, they're a blistering offense to watch. They are edge of the seat stuff. And whereas we've seen San Francisco in the postseason, obviously they're rushing at 7 million yards a game, so they don't need to. Jimmy G doesn't need to do anything. Raheem Mostert is just churning out yards for fun. They're more methodical. They're more explosive, Kansas City. So you know what? This is why we love the game. This is why we can't wait for it to see all of these battles play out. Now, if it's a 9-6 field goal fest at the end of it, don't go blaming me, but all signs are pointing to some kind of shootout in the high 30s. So we shall wait and see. But you know what? This is both of these sides' time, and to see the progression of Mahomes has been absolutely wonderful. And I just can't wait. I'm sure we all can't wait to see it all pan out a week on Sunday.
Well, unfortunately, that's where we need to leave it. So big thanks to Kadeem, thanks to Tim, special thanks, of course, to Daggers. It's time for a quick break with Mark Sessler before Duncan and the gang take a look at the 49ers defense. Thank you for listening.
Hey guys, Mark Sessler here from the Around the NFL podcast. And, when I think about this Super Bowl, I've got to double down on a prediction that I made on our podcast earlier this season that still has a little bit of life to it, a little bit of shelf life. And that is, I am convinced still, and it's come down to the final game of the year, that an animal, whether it be a pet or a wild animal, will interfere with this game in some fashion. And the prediction I made on our podcast was that the animal would actually prevent a player from appearing in the game. Now, that could be because, said player was jogging down the street and got bit by a dog, or maybe like a cat scratched someone in the face and they were unable to suit up. I don't know how it's gonna occur. Maybe there's a horse on the field during the game, ridden by a police, that goes wild and steps on someone's foot. So there's that. That's part one, that I do believe still that an animal will interfere with the Super Bowl in some nature. The second one is that I very strongly believe that the game will be delayed by at least 20 minutes due to some sort of event. Now, I don't think it's going to be a super negative event necessarily. It could be not unlike the Niners-Ravens Super Bowl when the electricity went out, but something will occur to delay and stop the game for 20 minutes or more, and that will be occurring in this Super Bowl. So here, those are two predictions. The second one is new. The first is a holdover from something that I still believe will happen. You heard it here first.
Hi, everyone. Thank you to Mark for that thought-provoking prediction for the game. I'm Duncan Terry from 99 Yards, and we'll be looking at the San Francisco 49ers defense in the build-up to the Super Bowl. Please welcome our guests on this portion of the podcast, Dan McLaughlin and Hannah Wilkes. How are we today?
Yeah, all good. Thank you. Thanks for having us on.
I'm very well, thank you. Excited to be chatting defense.
So we got the easy job here, right? Pat Mahomes has to go up against the number one passing defense, and defense wins championships. That's all there is, right? That's all there is to say, surely.
I mean, yes, defense does win championships, but I'm not sure we've ever seen a quarterback, an offense like the Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes, especially not in a Super Bowl. I remember thinking last year, actually, when it was the Rams-Patriots matchup, and you think you've got this Rams team that at the time were playing this explosive, amazing offense, and the Patriots completely shut them down. And I'm tempted to say that's going to happen again, because the 49ers defense is just so good. It's exactly what you want a defense to be. It's flawless. They've got playmakers and weapons everywhere. But there's the Patrick Mahomes element that I just think whatever you put in front of him, he can find a way to play through it. So I think it's going to be fascinating.
This isn't like the Packers. For starters, Patrick Mahomes won't be scared of throwing at Richard Sherman like Aaron Rodgers was 2 weeks ago. This is a different task. The setup for this Niners defense is just great. It's so much fun. The players they added, they've got one of the fastest defensive fronts in the league, and I'd imagine we'll see more teams operating with the wide nine, with the 4 fast defensive linemen all rushing from the outside, confusing offenses. But yeah, up against the likes of Tyreek Hill as well and Travis Kelce, this is not an easy task.
I mean, I'm totally impressed by the defensive line. Buckner, Armstead, Ford, and Bosa. I really don't know how they compete with that. I mean, the Titans' defensive line is good, but they're just a different gravy. But in terms of history, I mean, you only have to go as far back as Denver versus the Seahawks. Peyton Manning had that record-breaking season on offense, and the Seahawks just blew them away on defense.
And that's the fascinating thing, isn't it? Because I have this theory, as you guys, a couple of the guys that I work with at Sky, I love to say defense wins championships. My theory is offense wins you playoff games, and it wins you NFC championship titles, or it wins you AFC championship titles. But when you get to the Super Bowl, it's a completely different kettle of fish. But when you look at the defense for the 49ers, you look at that ferocious front seven they've got playmakers on each level of their defense. There's no one who's going to be afraid of Patrick Mahomes there. There are maybe some players that might make him think twice a little bit more than perhaps other defenses he's come up against. Compared to the Titans, I think we're in a completely different level and completely different ball game, with no disrespect to the Titans defense, but the 49ers is just something else. And I know the Packers I personally don't think the Packers are a particularly strong team, and I was kind of surprised they got to the NFC Championship game. But they, sacked Aaron Rodgers 3 times, forced 3 turnovers, making plays all over the field, and that's not going to go away no matter who the offense is.
It's an interesting comparison to the Titans' defense, because I think the Titans had the right scheme. I just don't necessarily think they had the right players for it. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see the Niners operating something similar to what the Titans were doing, that idea of like contain Patrick Mahomes rather than go for the sack, go for the big play, just try and slow him down. There was one play in the Packers game where you saw the defensive line get through to Aaron Rodgers, and you saw Rodgers about to take off, and then you saw the defensive line just back off a little bit, stop him from running, stop him from the bootlegs. And at one point, even they saw it coming. Dre Greenlaw was waving at Aaron Rodgers at that point as well. It was hilarious.
I mean, you mentioned Dre Greenlaw. He's obviously a huge factor, and their rookies have really brought them on. They were drafted number 4 last year, I believe, and they've got Bosa, they've got Greenlaw, and forgive me if I butcher the name, Aziz Al Shahir, and they're just playing at an absolute crazy quality for their first year. It's they're a real X factor here.
I can't quite get over Nick Bosa, if I'm honest. I don't think he realizes that he's not supposed to be that good yet. He is just everywhere. He's so fast. He's got so much powerful. He gets the game in a way that I don't think a 22-year-old should be able to play like that. And he's one of those rare kind of quarterbacks, isn't he, that he can affect the quarterback on every play. And he played, I think, 51 of sort of 63 defensive snaps for the 49ers in the NFC Championship game. So they're not afraid to use him to excess. And I think if anyone's going to cause Patrick Mahomes problems, I think he'll be the guy that, there's almost no fear because he's a rookie, because he's new. They just play with that kind of instinct and desire to just make hits and disrupt things that I think could cause Patrick Mahomes some problems. He's just ridiculous.
Dre Greenlaw, to add on to that, is one of the better sideline-to-sideline linebackers in the league now as well. And for whatever the Chiefs have in terms of a running game, you've got someone like Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner and Quan Alexander in the middle are all players that could slow that down. And the speed they've got could probably slow down any passes across the middle as well. But I agree, Nick Bosa, tied to D Ford, another addition in the offseason, along with Quan Alexander, one of the better off seasons that a team has had, probably not just saving Robert Saleh's career, but also putting him at the forefront of potential head coaching jobs. This is, an extremely good front 6/7. I love it.
And that's before we even mentioned, they've just got Richard Sherman as well, out quarterback. He played every single snap in that NFC Championship game in his 9th season. He shows no sign of letting up now. He's back into the rhythm of things. And I think as well, having someone so experienced, obviously is one of the captains of the team, but having someone so experienced alongside that younger talent, it's going to do them the absolute world of good. Dre Greenlaw actually, I think, was praising Richard Sherman this week. And can you imagine it being a young player and having someone like that on your team, on your side? So also as well, to help them deal with the pressure of the whole Super Bowl week, because it's an absolute circus. It's completely off the charts in terms of scale and the attention they'll get all week. So I think having someone like Richard Sherman there as well to kind of talk them through it, explain how it's going to be, prepare them for that, and keep them just level-headed and focused, I think is huge.
The Richard Sherman factor is absolutely huge. Obviously, you mentioned his experience and what he can bring to the rest of the team. But he's still playing with such high quality. But what was interesting this week is Darrelle Revis calling him out on Twitter and saying that he only plays one side and how ridiculous that is and how can he call himself elite. Tyreek Hill is going to move all over the place. And they've got Kelsey as well. Can they cope with that, do you think, when Richard Sherman, he does only play one side, but he plays it so well?
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? If you're only going to play one side, play it that well and play it really well. And I think, you want a cornerback that will cover both sides, and he's going to have to move a little bit more. And you've got the likes of Tyreek Hill on the field, but it's working for him. It's working for San Francisco, and he's probably not going to change how he plays in the lead up to the biggest game of the year, is he? Really? I find the back and forth on the Twitter really quite fascinating. I think Richard Sherman kind of summed it up. You enjoy watching it from your couch. I'll actually be at the game. You know what I mean? Like, there is that level, isn't it? He's got where he is playing that way. It served him well. yeah, you know, he's still one of the best cornerbacks in the game. I just that those two have got history, a lot of history. It's not the first time it's kicked off, and I just think if anything, that probably fires someone like Richard Sherman up even more.
It's not like he can't follow receivers either. We've seen it happen. Like the first half of the Packers game, he was following Devontae Adams, and in the second half, it felt like they were kind of goading Aaron Rodgers into making a throw that might not be as safe as he thought it was. But they've also got on the other side Emmanuel Mosley, who's come on leaps and bounds. Obviously, took over from Markella Witherspoon, who had a shocker against the Vikings. And Mosley's done quite well against the quicker receivers like Tyreek Hill. And then, as I say, the wide nine, the defensive front, is designed to slow. Well, it's designed to get to the quarterback quickly, but also it'll have the effect that it might force Travis Kelce into more of like a blocking role rather than necessarily like a receiving role, just because he's got D Ford lining up on his outside shoulder, which is never a good situation to be in.
Do you think D Ford has the advantage having come from the Chiefs because he know how they play, or do you think that they've got the advantage and know how to play him?
Well, I think it's a different system now, isn't it? Because Spagnuolo took over on the Chiefs defense, so I'd imagine if anything, the offense will know him, and Andy Reid is well, he's a genius, isn't he? He's done so much for other offensive coordinators, head coaches in the league. You see the quarterbacks he's worked with, you see the quarterbacks he's developed, and I'd imagine he'll know what D Ford is, but at defensive end, it's all about being like a physical phenomenon, isn't it? It's about being a freak. And these guys, Nick Bosa and D Ford, are that. So whether he'd be able to slow him down, I don't really know.
I think we often get so caught up in these, you know, they used to play for that team or they used to coach with that head coach and now they're a head coach somewhere else. And ultimately, I don't think it makes that much difference. It's great to talk about. It's great to sort of hypothesize on and you go, well, he's going to know that scheme. He's going to have an inside track on how they like to play. But I think then the temptation can be to sort of overcomplicate and tie yourself in knots with it. I think, you know, someone like D Ford's gonna play well regardless. He's gonna do what he's gonna do, and you know, like Dan said, the offensive scheme for the Chiefs has changed since he was there. So it's not gonna affect much, I don't think. I think what we're in for, regardless, and this cannot be emphasized enough, and I'm sure it will be on the other segments of this podcast, but when you've got this defense against the Chiefs offense, we are in for absolute fireworks. It's going to be amazing.
Absolutely. And as you guys were saying, you focus too much on Ford, and Buckner and Bosa are going to get you. I think the only guy we've only just touched on is Fred Warner, who really is the captain of that defense. He's the quarterback of the defense. And interestingly enough, he was part of that trade that the Bears traded up one place to get their quarterback. And the 49ers end up with Fred Warner. It's almost ridiculous, isn't it?
I'd say excellent sideline to sideline. And also the way the defense rushes the offensive line, there's a big gap in the middle, and that's what these guys have to fill. So Drake Greenlaw, Fred Warner have to fill the gap there. And if for some reason someone does decide to rush down the middle, which is rare against the teams that the Niners have been playing, then they're there to deal with it.
Yeah, he's one of those players, isn't he, as well? He's just phenomenal. He makes huge plays. He at the right time as well. And I just think, you know, it's almost when you start listing off the players that they've got on their defense, you almost kind of just think, yep, defense wins championships. This game's done. He's just got such great timing as well, I think, and he can just. Yeah, I think that's his timing on the ball and his timing as to make the runners shut things down, I think is phenomenal.
It's worth mentioning that the safeties as well, they're interchangeable. Tart and Ward, they can line up in cover two, they line up deep, they close quickly, but they can change, they can line up in the box as well, particularly Jaquiski Tart, a name that I have never got right first time. I think excellent.
You did pretty well there.
I did okay. Thanks. Lines up as a blitzer, so when they are rushing four, occasionally they bring Tart forward, and he has an impact on the game. Jimmy Ward deep, and they're going to be crucial to stopping those passes across the middle.
That's going to be about all we've got time for. Thank you to Dan, and of course for Hannah for joining us. Let's see what Adam and his team think of the 49ers offense.
Well, thanks for that, Duncan. I'm Adam Murfitt from 5 Yard Rush, and in this section of the podcast, we're going to be talking about the San Francisco 49ers offense. Wouldn't want to just take over the show on my own, so we do have some very special guests with me. So I'd like to bring in at this stage Dan Gorloff, Ian Stephen, and from TalkSport, Will Gavin. Evening, gents. How's it going?
So I'm Dan Harris Gorolov, Packers fan. So this is going to be a little bit painful, talking about how good the 49ers offense is and the fact that we couldn't stop them and what they're going to do in the next one. I started the Touchdown website, which Murph also contributes to. So yeah, I'm here repping the Touchdown, and hopefully I'll make it through without crying.
Yep, my name's Ian Stephen. I'm part of the NFL Scotland podcast. I'm a big Philadelphia Eagles fan, and I have no idea what I'm talking about.
Fantastic. Will?
I'm Will Gavin. I'm from TalkSport, as has been already said. I host our Sunday night football coverage and playoff coverage on TalkSport and our Super Bowl coverage as well. And I also work with Gridiron Magazine on the Gridiron Show podcast and all the affiliated nonsense that goes along with that as well with those boys. I am a San Francisco 49ers fan.
Yeah, so this works out nicely for you. You were even booked before the San Francisco 49ers booked their place onto the ticket. So
my good buddy Ollie Hunter, who I do my podcast with and who is out there doing the coverage with us out in Miami as well, is a huge Packers fan, and we did the game together on Sunday night on TalkSport, and it almost took away from my enjoyment a little bit because, as Dan will know, it wasn't an easy ride for Packers fans, and you know, seeing my best mate suffer is not actually the most enjoyable way to enjoy my team going to the Super Bowl. But I got to enjoy it eventually, and hopefully I'll still be happy in 8 or 9 days' time.
Fantastic. So as I mentioned at the top, so I'm Adam Murphy. So I'm a co-host of 5 Yard Rush, fantasy football NFL podcast that goes around all year round, and I am a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan. So the closest I ever get to a Super Bowl since 2003 is to get one of the signature Lombardi trophies that I win during fantasy football season, because I doubt I'm going to see my team win one anytime soon. So
hey, you could be the first team to host it in your own stadium next year.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen, but I'd love that. The belief has gone, my friend. But I guess I was the natural choice to host, seeing as I can learn something about Super Bowls from all of you, although I have been to a couple. But I want to start on the 49ers offense. That's what we're going to talk about, and I really want to kick it off with George Kittle, who for me is one of my favorite players in the NFL. He is very, very well thought of tight end, clearly top two of his position in the league, and the tight end has never won the Super Bowl MVP, but there are two the two best tight ends in the NFL right now, with Travis Kelce on the other side. But can Kittle be the man to fire, one, the 49ers to Super Bowl 54 victory, and second, can he potentially be the first tight end to win the MVP in the Super Bowl? Kick this one off to Will, first of all.
Yeah, so I try not to advertise my fandom too much on social media. Like I'm open about being a 49ers fan, but I try not to be too much of a homer, considering, we're covering every team, as it were. But there's one argument I will happily get into at any stage with any person, which is the idea that George Kittle is in the top two tight ends in the NFL. It's not the top two. It's not 1A and 1B. It is George Kittle on his own plinth at the top, and Travis Kelce staring up at him saying, I wish I could block. Because Travis Kelce is a fantastic pass-catching tight end, and he is maybe actually the best in that position in the NFL. But George Kittle is a left tackle, a fullback, a wide receiver, and a tight end, all bundled into one human being. He and Karl Juszczyk were as responsible for that victory last Sunday as Raheem Mostert was, and he didn't catch a pass until the fourth quarter. I absolutely adore the man. Like I haven't another 49ers player probably since Frank Gore in his pomp. And I will absolutely go back to the idea that he could be the MVP next Sunday.
Well, that's fair. Well, I guess we first of all got to see what he does in the game first, because if he has one reception for 6 yards, I think you're going to struggle to make a case there. But Dan, you've seen quite a lot of George Kittle. What do you think his chances are of being the Super Bowl MVP at the end of the game if the 49ers pull off the win?
It depends how you're going to measure it. So, I mean, they've not really been scoring that many touchdowns through Kittle, I don't think. But in terms of the matchup that he's got with Kansas City, I'm not really sure who's picking him up there. Their linebackers are okay in coverage, but they're not league leading by any means. So I'd have thought that he'll bully the middle of the field a little bit, and probably at the sideline too. So I think he's got a really good chance. But given the way that sometimes the offense goes for the 49ers, it always goes to the winning team, as we know. And you're quite likely to get one of those running backs pop up with 2 or 3 touchdowns. So I think that's probably my argument for why Kittle might not get it, because he's not going to get it for blocking, unfortunately.
I think game flow has a huge part of it as to what Dan's saying there, because if it's similar to the Vikings game or the Packers game and they establish a lead and just decide to run the ball down your throat, then he's not going to be making those flashy numbers like Julian Edelman last year. I mean, what Julian Edelman was doing winning a Super Bowl MVP where only 16 points were scored in total, including one of the best offenses in the NFL being held to 3 points. They like to give it to whoever's got the splashiest numbers. So Dan's absolutely right. If he doesn't have the splashy numbers, he won't win it. But I think he could easily be the most important player in the game, even if he doesn't win the award.
Yeah, that's fair. And Ian, you support a team in the Eagles who also have a very good tight end in Zach Ertz, and actually they've got another good young one in Dallas Goedert as well. So I don't want to forget about him. What are your thoughts on Kittle, and do you think he's someone that can potentially walk away with the MVP?
Well, he's currently sitting at odds at 11-1, tied with Travis Kelce to win the MVP. But it all comes down to Steve Spagnuolo. He's got the option of taking 1 or 2 things completely out of the game. That's what he spent the last 2 weeks doing, trying to work out who it is he's going to factor out. Is it going to be the running game they're going to completely stop? Is it going to be Kittle and then take their chances in single coverage with Sanders and Deebo Samuel? I like my chances with Sanders and Deebo Samuel over Kittle in the running game, so there's a good chance he's going to end up having high-low coverage, and he's not going to put up the numbers that would probably get you that MVP.
I think like the Packers last week, the Chiefs play a lot of sub packages, a lot of nickel, a lot of dime, but what they do is they use Tyrann Mathieu in those packages almost as a de facto linebacker, strong safety, a guy that can do it all. I think we might see him matched up on Kittle a lot and go down that Patriots route of double the best guy and then use your best guys on kind of single coverage on people you're not so worried about. But I think that if they don't double Kittle, he's going to get the ball. And if they do double him, it's going to leave holes in the run game. So it's just such a multi-dimensional offense. You don't know which direction it's going to go in any week.
I would actually counter that, and I think they might actually leave Matthew matched up in somebody, and I think they might bring Sorensen down to the line of scrimmage. Remember when the Patriots went to 5 linemen to counter the zone run against Gurley? You could well see that, trying to take the running game out that way. And then the issue with that is the naked boot. You've got to have somebody who's disciplined to stay in there for the naked boot when it comes back to your side, and I think Sorensen might actually have that task, because it's a fairly large kind of depth of receiver route that they run, usually maybe about 20 yards for a then and out or a comeback off the naked boot, and if you get pressure on Sorensen early, Garoppolo has to throw it away.
It's a worthwhile point to definitely consider, and I think it's definitely a strong counter argument. I think the part of the offense I think we should really be concentrating on now is the San Francisco 49ers run game, and its unpredictability in nature. At the start of the season, they brought in Tevin Coleman, but it was Matt Breida that was getting the majority of the carries. Then it kind of swapped in the middle of the season. Then towards the end of the season, it was Raheem Mostert that was carrying most of the workload. And then you get the victory against the Vikings. It's actually Tevin Coleman who was running with the ball, making the biggest plays, and everyone thought, maybe this is time for Tevin Coleman. Maybe they rest him towards the end of the season, and then you get the NFC Championship game, and you get Raheem Mostert carry the ball for 29 times for 220 yards and 4 touchdowns. And this is a guy who failed to make it on 6 NFL rosters, barely played any snaps before being picked up by the 49ers. And we saw some flashes of him last season, but Will, who do you think is going to be the man who's going to carry the ball the majority of the time, or do you think it might be a more even split? Is Coleman going to get a say in this, or are we expecting this to go through most, or will we just have to see how the game works out?
Yeah, and Coleman's shoulder injury, the dislocation, there's still not a huge amount of clarity on that at the moment. I think what they have got is three guys, including Breeder, who had a couple of fumbling problems late in the year, but they've got three guys and who they've gone out and found people who fit that Shanahan system, and I mean the one that was handed down from Mike Shanahan to Gary Kubiak, to Kyle Shanahan. All they look for is that Terrell Davis style, one cut back, one cut explosive, because they make such fantastic gaps in the blocking scheme, and if you go and watch the breakdowns that people have been putting out, and you're seeing, so much intelligent blocking from the fronts, whether it's, little things like there was a block on a 10-yard must run off the right tackle where Kittle came up to the first level to meet Blake Martinez and then just faked out and went past him to the second level. No, it wasn't Martinez, sorry, it was Zadarius Smith. Zadarius Smith was caught off the hop for just enough time because he was expecting the block that actually he was left unblocked, but it left a gap there. And there's so much of that going on in their scheme that you just think if you've got an explosive guy who can make a cut, any of them could end up being the guy in this game. And so Mostert's journey and his story is phenomenal. You mentioned about the being cut by 6 teams. He's been one of the best gunners in the NFL for the last 2 or 3 years, but he had his handling problems last year, and Shanahan, kept faith in him carrying the ball, kept faith in him, pushing him in that side of the game on the offense as well as special teams. And it's, shown out wonderfully for them, but it does feel really interchangeable. And I guess that's scary when you also know that they can run, Deebo Samuel on end arounds, and Emmanuel Sanders will carry the ball, and George Kittle's had a carry in the postseason, and Carl Juszczyk in there as well. So
yeah, absolutely. And there's a couple more facets of this offense I want to cover off. We're in the 2-minute warning now. So, Dan, just a quick word on Jimmy Garoppolo. He is someone who is coming off a game where he went 6 of 8 for 77 yards in the NFC title game. Is this a game that perhaps, if the Chiefs start to stack the box and manage to control the run a little bit, that he will potentially have to try and win this game? Or do you think that a similar game plan to what we've seen in the playoffs so far might be strong enough if they can establish the run early?
The thing that I will say about Shanahan and Garoppolo and this offense is it's probably the most unpredictable in the league. I think they're number 1 in the league on play action, number 1 in pre. The defense doesn't know where it's going to go. Will mentioned Deebo Samuel there, who's got as many touchdowns running the ball as he has catching it. They let the game dictate how much Garoppolo was going to get involved last week, I think. And the Packers' run D's been pretty bad all season, to say the least. So I think it wouldn't be the worst method from the Chiefs to see if Garoppolo can win the game. But given that Garoppolo does have Deebo Samuel, Sanders, some deep threats with Goodwin, etc., and then we've already talked about Kittle at length, I think that they've got some good options there for him to go win the game. I don't think he's one of the top 10 QBs in the league or anything like that, but he's definitely good enough. We've seen Eli Manning win 2 Super Bowls, so
definitely. So Ian, on that then, looking at the weapons then and focusing on that, we've mentioned Deebo Samuel, mentioned Emmanuel Sanders. There's also Kendrick Bourne, who's been known to come up with a crucial touchdown. Depending on how this game goes and if Jimmy G is required to throw the ball a bit more, who do you think is the primary threat and most likely to get the first look in this offense? Because it has sort of changed a lot. It was Sanders when he first signed, and now it seems to be more Deebo. But what can we expect out of these receivers?
If San Francisco get the better start, then it's going to be lots of quick routes. It's going to be getting the ball out of Garoppolo's hand quickly. I love Deebo Samuel as a player. I think he was great coming out of college. His hands are excellent. He's tough. He takes on defenders when he runs with the ball. But if San Francisco have to play the deep enough speed to worry Kansas too much, and the interior of the San Francisco line is not good pass blocking, and they're up against Chris Jones, who's one of the best defensive tackles in the league. I think it's going to be tough if it comes down to actually a gunslinging competition for San Francisco.
At the same time as that, though, I think a lot of people are saying that going into this game because of I'm not blaming you at this necessarily, Ian, but I've heard a lot of this the last few weeks because recency bias over what we've seen from weeks kind of 16 through now suggests that if they've got a lead, that's what they'll do. But if they're from behind, let's not forget that, against the Seahawks, he came out in the second half and went 10 for 10 to start the half against a banged up defense, but looked really good and they schemed it really well for him. Against Jadeveon Clowney, let's not forget, absolutely ruined him back in week 11. The fact is that we haven't seen what he can do in the latter part of the season when you're coming up against the best teams. But I don't think that I think you're underrating the speed when it comes to the likes of Deebo Samuel, etc. And I actually think that because of the game flow the last 2 weeks, this has been my kind of bold prediction I've been throwing out there for the last couple of days. I think there's a wrinkle. I think there's either a play or a setup or a system that we've not seen Shanahan throw out yet, that he's been holding back because they've been winning these games. And actually, on Garoppolo, the knock against him this season has partially been that he's not good with the ball. And there was one horrible interceptable throw against the Packers, which he was fortunate not to get picked off. Actually, if you look at his 14 interceptions this season, the first thing is 10 of them came in the first 2 weeks. Since then, he's had 4 in the following 8 games, and one of those came in that 2 interception game against the Rams. So that's 2 more interceptions across 7 games. They all look very similar. They're all kind of underneath to linebackers. So if they can do stuff to scheme him away from those throws, then that's great. But actually, the other thing that really struck me when I was kind of doing my research into this game is that he's thrown 14 interceptions this season. On the following drive, they've scored 8 times. And on the following 2 drives, they've scored on 12 or 14 occasions. This guy is so unflappable. I think he's really got that level of confidence. If he makes a mistake early, he's not going to go inside himself. And I actually think Jimmy Garoppolo will surprise some people if he's forced to go into a shootout like he was in, say, New Orleans.
The thing I would say with the narrative here is it's great offense versus great defense, when actually the Chiefs have proven this season that they are pretty much a well-improved defense, and then the San Francisco 49ers can play as well. They've put up a lot of points. They've established the run, and as Will, you've just been saying there, Jimmy G can get it done when he absolutely needs to, which I think makes this a more fascinating Super Bowl than an offense versus defense scenario that's kind of been painted. I think it doesn't do justice to the other side of the balls. I think that's what we've are desperately looking forward to, but unfortunately the buzzer's going to beat us here, so I'm going to leave it with that. But many thanks to Dan and Ian and to you, Will, for joining this session, and looking forward to hearing what the others have said. We are going to be the last on, so looking forward to hearing the rest of it. But it's now back to our guest host, Liz Bandari.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed the show.
Liz, before we go on, what's your prediction for the game?
So for me, I'm going to go with a 49ers win. It's a bit of a difficult one to say because obviously that's my straight division rival, being a Seahawks fan. But yeah, I kind of think stick with my conference championship. They've been absolutely amazing all season. And I think just for that reason, I'd love to see them go on a win. Plus, it makes my husband happy. So what can I do?
Nice, I can see that happening. Because defense wins championships at the end of the day.
Exactly. It just remains for me to say thank you to all our contributors. Make sure you go and check out their awesome work. And thank you to our special guests, Will Gavin, Hannah Wilkes, Charles Dagnall, Tom Deacon, and Mark Sessler. Thanks again for listening. Please share the podcast with your friends and followers. And don't forget to enter the raffle for Steve Rains. We'll share details on Twitter from the @LiveLombardi account. And enjoy the game.